Every year, as cruise season and hurricane season overlapped, something sinister took place on the high seas. The storms created chaos, but the real danger lurked within the luxury liners that promised escape and adventure. Morgan and Megan Jacobs, fraternal twins known for their mischief and wild imaginations, were about to uncover a terrifying secret that would turn their world upside down. Morgan and I grew up in a small coastal town where the sight of massive cruise ships docking was a regular part of our lives. We were always fascinated by the colossal vessels and the promise of distant horizons. Our parents, Thomas and Elaine Jacobs, were hardworking and deeply involved in the community. They had high expectations for us, often driven to exasperation by our wild antics and constant troublemaking. Our older sibling Alex was the golden child, excelling in school and sports, always making our parents proud. Alex's achievements often cast a long shadow over us, and we were seen as the troublesome twins. Morgan and I, despite our reputation, were inseparable. We shared everything: secrets, dreams, and a mutual curiosity about the world. We had a knack for finding adventure in the most mundane places, much to the chagrin of our parents. Our adventurous spirits, however, were about to lead us down a path we could never have imagined. It all started with our neighbors, the Andersons. They were a lively family who lived 2 houses down. Bob and Nancy Anderson, along with their teenage son Tim and their little girl Lily, were the heart of our neighborhood. They hosted barbecues, pool parties, and always had a kind word for everyone. The Andersons were more than just neighbors, they were family. One sunny afternoon, Bob Anderson announced that they were going on a Caribbean cruise. The whole neighborhood buzzed with excitement for them. They waved goodbye, leaving promises of stories and souvenirs. But when they didn't return, it was as if a light had gone out in the neighborhood. The official story was that they had decided to start a new life abroad, but Morgan and I sensed something was off. The Andersons had been too attached to their lives here to just vanish without a trace. Our curiosity only grew when we noticed more and more families going on cruises and never returning. Our suspicions were dismissed by the adults, who chalked it up to our history of fabricating wild stories. Even Alex, who was usually the first to defend us, found our theories hard to believe. One rainy afternoon, while rummaging through the attic, Morgan and I stumbled upon a stack of old newspapers. As we pored over the yellowed pages, we discovered a pattern. Each year, dozens of families disappeared during cruise season. With each disappearance, there was always an accompanying hurricane that provided the perfect cover. The eerie connection sent chills down our spines. Determined to uncover the truth, we hacked into travel agencies' databases and cross-referenced missing persons reports with cruise passenger lists. What we found was chilling. None of the disappearances were reported officially, but the patterns were undeniable. People were vanishing and no one seemed to care. Our investigation took a darker turn when we hacked into a government database. We found encrypted files detailing a secret pact between world leaders. Each country had its elite agents who would kidnap cruise passengers during storms. These unfortunate souls were never seen again because they were being harvested for meat, which ended up on grocery store shelves around the world. It was a grotesque and horrifying conspiracy, hidden in plain sight. The world leaders had sanctioned this atrocity as a grotesque solution to overpopulation and inflation, the ultimate sacrifice for the so-called greater good. Our lives changed forever when our family won an exclusive Hawaiian cruise. Our parents were ecstatic, but Morgan and I knew better. This was no ordinary prize. It was a one-way ticket to oblivion. We tried to warn our parents, but our reputation as troublemakers worked against us. No one believed our wild claims of government conspiracies and human harvesting. Even Alex, who always looked out for us, thought we were overreacting. Determined to save our family, Morgan and I devised a plan. We secretly packed survival gear and weapons we had stashed away from our camping trips. As the ship set sail, we kept a low profile, watching and waiting for any sign of danger. The cruise started off like any other. There were extravagant meals, endless entertainment, and breathtaking ocean views. But Morgan and I were on high alert. We noticed the crew members were unusually attentive to certain passengers, marking their cabins discreetly. One night, a violent storm hit. The ship rocked violently, and most passengers took to their cabins. We knew this was the moment. We heard muffled screams and the sounds of a struggle coming from the corridors. Morgan peered through the keyhole and saw armed men dragging passengers away. We sprang into action, slipping out of our cabin and moving stealthily through the ship. We saw other passengers being taken, their faces twisted in terror. Blood smeared the walls and pooled on the floor, the metallic scent filling our nostrils. We managed to avoid detection, but we knew time was running out. We made our way to the ship's lower decks, where we discovered a refrigerated storage room. Inside, we found the missing passengers, bound and gagged, awaiting their gruesome fate. The room was filled with the sound of muffled cries and the cold, sterile hum of the refrigeration units. The sight was horrific. People of all ages, their eyes wide with fear, their bodies bruised and bloody. We freed as many as we could, rallying them to fight back. The fear in their eyes turned to determination as they realized they had a chance to escape. We armed ourselves with whatever we could find: kitchen knives, broken pipes, anything that could be used as a weapon. A fierce battle ensued. Armed with makeshift weapons, we led the charge against the kidnappers. The passengers, driven by fear and desperation, fought with everything they had. The sounds of clashing metal and cries of defiance filled the air. Blood splattered the walls, and the metallic scent grew stronger as bodies fell to the ground. Just as we seemed to be gaining the upper hand, the ship's alarms blared. The storm outside had intensified, and the ship was in danger of capsizing. In the chaos, we led the survivors to the lifeboats. We launched into the turbulent sea, praying we would reach safety. The next morning, we were rescued by a passing cargo ship. Exhausted and traumatized, we recounted our harrowing ordeal. This time, our story was too detailed and corroborated to be ignored. The survivors backed us up, and the truth finally came to light. But the victory came at a terrible cost. Morgan had been gravely injured during the fight. He had shielded me from an attack, taking a brutal hit that left him unconscious. As we were rescued, his condition worsened. In the sterile, cold light of the ship's infirmary, Morgan drew his last breath, his hand clutched tightly in mine. His eyes, once so full of mischief and life, now stared blankly into the distance. I was left to navigate the aftermath alone. The global conspiracy was exposed, and the horrifying practice of harvesting humans for meat was brought to an end. World leaders faced justice, and the public was outraged. I was hailed as a hero, our once questionable reputation redeemed by our bravery. But it felt like a hollow victory without Morgan by my side. Weeks later, I sat at the dinner table with my family. My parents, Thomas and Elaine, along with Alex, were eagerly digging into a hearty meal of roast meat. The savory aroma filled the room, but I couldn't bring myself to take a bite. Memories of the cruise and the horrors we uncovered haunted me. As I absent-mindedly pushed the food around on my plate, my eyes fell on a piece of meat in front of me. My heart stopped. There, seared into the flesh, was a mark, an unmistakable birthmark that Morgan had on his shoulder. My stomach churned and I felt bile rise in my throat. I looked up, my vision swimming with tears, and saw my family's eyes fixed on me. Their expressions were unsettling, their eyes glinting with an unnatural hunger. They chewed slowly, deliberately, never breaking eye contact. The room seemed to close in around me, the once familiar faces now appearing predatory, almost monstrous. "Why aren't you eating, Megan?" my mother asked, her voice sweet but with an edge that sent chills down my spine. I couldn't speak. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the impossible. The conspiracy was supposed to be over. The harvesting was supposed to have stopped. Yet here I was, facing the undeniable truth. Morgan hadn't just been a victim of a brutal fight. He had been harvested, and now his remains were on our table. My family's eyes bore into me, their expressions slowly morphing into twisted grins. The room was filled with an eerie silence, broken only by the sound of their chewing. I felt trapped, suffocated by the weight of the realization. I stood up abruptly, knocking my chair over. My family's eyes followed me, their grins widening. As I backed away, I could see their fingers tightening around their utensils, the glint of metal reflecting the dim light. "Where are you going, Megan?" Alex asked, his voice low and menacing. I turned and ran, the sound of their laughter echoing behind me. The house seemed to warp and twist around me, the walls closing in as I stumbled through the darkened halls. I burst out the front door, the cold night air hitting me like a slap. I ran until the sounds became distant, knowing I can never return to my past life, and unknowing where to go, I ran,